My name is Bobby Kendall. After a decade of playing country music, my family and I moved to West Central Illinois to chase my true passion, giant Midwest whitetail bucks. The Whitetail Group was born in 2015 and has grown exponentially ever since. We develop properties for the elite whitetail hunting experience. This is not my hobby or even an obsession. This is a lifestyle.
My name is Toby Stay. I'm a broker with Land Guys, specializing in the marketing of recreational property. My role with the Whitetail Group is to help identify and design properties that can produce world-class whitetails. This is not a series just about hunting. This is a series about the process of developing farms for hunting.
Join us as we document the transformation of some of our project farms from ordinary dirt to extraordinarily productive recreational properties. We are the Whitetail Group. So we're here today with Austin from Herman Brothers Pond Management. We're going to shock the pond here on the Pike 165. We're going to take some data, see what kind of fish are here, see what sizes they are. We're going to talk about everything from the water quality to the fish that are here and what you can do with this pond to reach different goals.
We're going to cover everything from, like Bobby said, the water quality, what's in the water, the natural structure and the contour of the lake, just to basically get an entire baseline of what we have here. And we'll take every factor that we look at today, all the data that we collect and everything, we'll put all that together and we'll be able to provide, multiple avenues of management depending on what sort of species you want to try to promote in this body of water. Today, basically, we're gonna start off running electricity out of this boat through the generator, through the inverter, and then out the front of the boat. And we'll have guys in the front of the boat basically going around the entire perimeter of the pond, fishing for the fish. We won't just be, you don't just put the boat in and just turn the electricity on and boom, everything magically floats up. We'll be going around and fishing for them. And then as we go around, the fish will be, they'll be stunned for just a, brief couple seconds to where it gives us enough time to collect them, put them in the live well. And then once we have them in the live well, we basically will just work through every single fish. We'll count the fish, we'll go over every aspect of that fishery and help explain what I'm seeing. I'll explain what I'm seeing to you guys and explain it in a way to where you can understand what's here right now and what this lake is naturally producing.
We're going to do this survey and set up the management end of this pond so that it's one more aspect of this farm that you can enjoy and continue to manage and build and pass on one day to your kids or whoever else.
There's a bass right there. The crappie. Holy cow! knifed him. I got a wad of fish.
We're gonna have to shove you off the boat, Toby. Oh, there you go. Broke
I don't want to keep loading the tank with more fish until we work through them and get them out. Before we even talk about the fish, the lake itself is absolutely killer. Like, you've got 23 to 25 foot of depth out in the middle. And then you've got just beautiful shorelines. Like, your shorelines are sloped so perfectly to where there's no lacking spawning zone. There's no lacking littoral zone. That's what it's called. And that is what you want on a killer fishing lake. Like, if you don't have that littoral zone, your fish population will be just naturally a lot lower. You won't have near the numbers. At this point, it's just a matter of, let's figure out, what do you want to do? You know, do you want to continue on this path of like this lake just producing killer panfish, killer bluegill, you know, monster crappie? Or do you want to kind of try to like turn it around a little bit and start to try to produce some really big bass? Or do you want to find like that happy medium to where you can have some killer bass fishing and killer pan fishing? Because this lake can produce both. It totally can. It's just a matter of dialing in on that. We're gonna work through some of these fish real quick, and we're gonna start with some bass, but we can get Bill's mouth drooling real quick. Show him that sucker. It's beautiful fish, isn't it? That's a beautiful black crappie. It's awesome. So we're gonna tag some fish. So this is a fish tagging gun. You have one of these, right, Bobby? So what you do is stick it right behind their fin, insert the tag, boom. So this fish now has a name. This fish is number 101. And so what we do, he'll write down 101. I'll put it on the stick. I'll measure it at 8.5 inches. We'll weigh it at 0.24 pounds. So this fish right here, number 101, is 8.5 inches, 0.24 pounds. So this fish is that size in 2020. So then when someone buys this property, 2021, they can catch number 101 and be like, dude, look at how this fish has grown. And if you get someone to buy this that's like willing to keep some sort of a log, they can track it so well. And then that even helps me be able to come in and manipulate it for them even better. Right now, what we're doing is we're just tagging bass. And the only reason we're doing that is so I can look at all of the different bass and just see what we've got. This is gonna be gross, but you just have to bear with me. That's the spine of a fish. It's kind of interesting. It's always interesting to be able to like see exactly what the fish are eating. You know, sometimes you can see fins sticking out of a bass's throat, just of like bluegill and stuff. It's always interesting just to see that. 12.25, tag number 103. .92. Just to kind of get into this relative weight term, it's a really important term. It really factors into how are the fish growing and are the fish growing. Those fish that we just collected they are actively growing, which is very good to see, because if they're not actively growing, that means that your lake's potential is 12 inches. And who wants a lake that has a potential of catching 12-inch bass? Nobody. So it's good to see that these bass are growing. So what I'm getting at is to basically determine their relative weight and how healthy are they, I take their length compared to their weight. So at 12 inches, a fish should weigh 3/4 of a pound. So both of those fish, that fish that was 11.75 was well over what it should even be at 12 inches. So what that tells me is that its relative weight is over 100%. And when a bass relative weight is at or above 100%, that means it's actively growing. Following with me? That means that its potential is there. You know, it has the possibility of reaching trophy caliber if the food source is there when they get to 14 inches, if the food source is there when they get to 15 inches, if the food source is there when they get to 18 inches, and then so on and so on.
So does that tell you so far that you don't need to pull any of that?
So that tells me that that size class is doing well.
Okay.
So the other size classes, we're gonna get to. What that tells me is the 12-inch fish are doing actually fairly well, because my explanation for that would be, there's quite a few of these. This is a big male bluegill. This is a big female bluegill. What do male and female bluegill do? Produce babies. That's what they're here to do. That's what, as you know, like with deer, what drives a buck the most mad? The rut. Reproducing, passing on his genetics. That's what they want to do. Like that is an animal's main purpose in life. Even though it sounds weird, that's what they're here to do. They're here to pass on their genetics. So these fish are spawning like crazy and producing just tons and tons of food for those 12-inch bass, which is great. If you didn't have a bunch of these, your bass probably would be stunted out at 12 inches. But so far, you've got plenty of food for them at that size. So that's good. This is a killer freaking net of panfish right there. And this right here is just what it's naturally doing. Like, this is no strategic management. Like, it's awesome what this lake is just doing on its own. I love it. I love lakes that produce just giant crappie and giant bluegill. Trying to get some more bass so we can see them. There's just tons of panfish. It's awesome. There's a nice bass. We can weigh and measure that sucker. So next, let's see if we can get another size class. So the reason I'm looking for different sizes is just so I can see how all of the bass are doing. That's a fat bass. I can just tell you right off the bat, that fish is gonna be, right at 100%. And like I said, I'm just guessing. That fish has, see the little whiskers sticking out of his mouth? There's a crawdad in his belly. 14 inches. So a 14-inch fish should weigh 23 ounces, which is roughly 1.5 pounds. So let's see what he comes out to. So right there, 1.54. 1.54. So that fish is about 101%. So that tells me that at least one fish at 14 inches is healthy and actively growing, which is a good start. We got a full tank though. We're still looking at everything. It's 12.5 inches, 0.86. So that fish is still right there. It's good to see. We're not gonna keep boring you with 12 inches, but 11.5 inches. .106. That's 0.7. So if you look at these fish, I don't know if you can see the black spots in their fins. Can you see those? If you look really close. Yeah, so those are parasites. They're not the end of the world. It's not like it's a huge deal to have parasites. Most lakes that don't have red ear sunfish will have parasites in the fish. So anybody know what a red ear sunfish is?
Yeah, shellcracker.
You've seen them. So red ear sunfish are called shellcrackers because their primary diet is crustaceans, little snails. So like if you dug, a bunch of this muck out, you'd see snails. You'd see little crustaceans in there. And those snails carry the parasite. They're a part of the life cycle of this black spot parasite and a number of other parasites, but in this fish, they have the black spot. And so what you can do to correct this parasite issue is you can stock red ear sunfish. And you don't have to stock them at a high number, you just have to stock them at a size that won't get eaten by these bass. And when you stock those, the red ear will come in and interrupt the life cycle of the parasite. And so that parasite won't be able to get on the fish. And it's not doing a lot of damage to a fish, but it is a host. The fish is a host of this parasite. So the parasite's living off the fish's blood and vitamins and nutrients. So whenever you have that, obviously, when you're trying to make it better, that's something that you kind of want to start with. There's all different size classes of bass too. You know, you guys saw them. You saw, you know, there's little guys. Let me see if I can find one. There's that size. There's that size. There's just a little tiny one in here I wanted to show you. There's this size. You know, they're all over, which is great. It tells me that they're spawning. Another thing, I don't want to really get into crappie yet, but another thing that's great is you've seen multiple sizes of crappie too. So that tells me that your crappie obviously are spawning, and not only are they spawning, but their spawn is actually being sustained by the numbers of them, and it's being controlled to keep them from getting out of control by the number of bass in here. So, you know, as we talked about it earlier, the dynamic of the bluegill and the bass. The bluegill and the bass are very important, but the bass and the crappie are also very important. Having bass abundant enough to control a crappie population is important in producing, you know, a lot of good crappies. If you didn't have high numbers of bass, your crappie numbers would be a lot higher and their overall health would be a lot lower. 13 and a half, 1.10. So that was a 13 and a half inch fish. That was actually a little light. So when I'm looking at these numbers and I'm looking at kind of recommending what fish to harvest, that's something that I'm looking at, you know, which fish are a little light, which fish need to come out. So, and that would be one that I would cull out, for instance. But I would only cull it out if the goal was to try to grow bigger bass. If your goal was to try to continue this panfish population, I would leave that bass in here. And I would leave it hungry, and I would leave it just eating tons of baby bluegill, because that's what you want. When you're growing trophy bluegill and trophy crappie, like the next level, you have to have tons of hungry bass that are just swimming around eating all day long. You have to have that. But if you want to have trophy bass, you don't want that. You don't want a lot of mouths to feed. You want a lot of food, not as many mouths to feed. Kind of simply, it's kind of simple, but that's the basic. 13 inches. .98. In this scenario, as it is now, you're not gonna have a lot of 3 to 5 pound bass. It's gonna be very minimal. The lake is naturally just producing a lot of predators. Not too many predators, just a lot. And that will just kind of naturally produce a very healthy panfish population. In general, you're not gonna have just a ton of 3 to 5 pound bass in this scenario. If you want to have a bunch of 3 to 5 pound bass, you can do it. This lake is gonna hold the forage. You can totally do it. You just have to harvest bass. You have to take them out. You know, like for instance, if this is a 3 acre lake and right now you have, this is just a random number, but 400 bass, if you wanted to make it into just a trophy bass lake, you would take out like, I mean, you take out like 100 to 110 pounds of bass a year, every single year. And you would only leave very few bass in here. And when I say very few, I don't mean like 20. I'm just saying, you know, just a portion of what's already here. And those bass that are left in here will grow tremendously in like 2 years. From what I've seen out of maybe 10 fish, to grow larger bass in here, you would find the skinniest fish, which right now I think are gonna be 13 to 14 inches. You would take those out. You would remove them from the equation because they're your wolves. They're coming in and they're eating a lot of your food and they're the most abundant. Take them out. And after 2 to 3 years, you would have those 10 to 12 inch fish that I've said are very, very healthy. You know, the 12 inch fish that were almost a pound. Those fish will grow so quickly because it'll open up that food source where those 14 inchers were eating all the food. That food will be available, but those 14 inch predators won't be there. So those 12 inchers will just boom. So that's a big old girl.
So you know just based off size that's a female?
Typically, yep. And you can see with her vent, you can see that she's spawning. She's in the spawning process. It's red and it's protruding. Like with a male, it wouldn't look like that. I'm gonna guess she's 18 and a half inches and she's about 3 point, oh man. She's 19 and a half inches. She's long. Tag number 111. 4.00. So she's 4 pounds. There's a bass. It's gonna be a little over 14 inches, 14.25. It's fairly skinny. 1.38. So what did I say? 14-inch fish should weigh 1.5 pounds. This is 1.38. So we're starting to see where your fish are getting skinny. Those are the fish that you pull out. It's as easy as that. You pull that size class out, you pull out some of the fish that are starting to get to that point, and you allow those fish that are still young and healthy to grow big, to surpass them and grow really big. You've got a lot of these too. You know, a lot of these 12.5 to 13 inchers. But if all you want to do is produce a lake that is going to just grow tons and tons of food that you can eat, you got it. The fish I'm throwing back are 13 inches. They're all 13 to 14, 12 to 14 inches basically. So now let's kind of start talking about bluegill. 9-inch bluegill. 0.56. It's 8.25 inches. So I'm just going through and getting some sizes for a couple of these bluegill. 0.46. This right here is a male bluegill. This right here is a female bluegill. You see the differences? Large ear tab right there. Smaller ear tab. The coloration's a lot different. You know, this is a lot darker orange, sometimes purple, pinkish color. This is a lot more yellow. On the male, they'll actually have a black tip on their scales on top of their head too. And on a female, you're not gonna see that as, you know, prevalent. With bluegill, if your goal is to grow trophy bluegill, what you do is you harvest female bluegill. You get them out of here because they're the ones laying the eggs. They're the ones reproducing and causing the higher population. If you wanna grow big bluegill, you leave the males in here. All you have is a bunch of males. And what they do is they start to establish the alpha male effect. And what that is whenever there's one male that's like, you know, just completely whooping the other guys, all the other male bluegill in the pond will work on growing up to that size because they will directly compete with each other to try to get the biggest. I know it sounds weird, but it's the alpha male effect. It causes them to basically just grow much faster and much larger than they otherwise would. So like, if somebody came to me and wanted to grow just the biggest bluegill ever, that's what I'd say, is I'd reduce the number of females, leave your males in here, and let them just do their thing. Let them eat, let them grow, and let them not have to worry about spawning as much.
Can you take out too many females?
No, you literally only need like 15 females in an acre pond to sustain a population. Whereas normally there'd be like hundreds and hundreds. If you want to keep this pond growing big bluegill, you actually don't even want to put structure on the shorelines. Because if you put structure on the shorelines, what that does is it gives the fish a place to hide. But if you don't have structure, your bass will just chase and eat fish, and they'll always be hungry, and they have to keep chasing, and they have to keep chasing. But if you give them a place to sit, they'll just sit there, and then they'll eat. And then they'll be good for a while. They don't have to eat for quite as long. But if you don't give them that place to sit, their metabolism is burning calories. So they're constantly eating and cropping down your bluegill. But if you want to grow big bass, you want to just litter this freaking place with trees in 6 to 8 foot of water. You're littering this pond with trees, with mossback fish racks. Those are killer fish structures. If you want the biggest bass you possibly can get, you want to have all the food in the world, all sorts of different types of food. You want to have habitat to where they do not have to move. It makes them tough to fish for though, because you have to put it right in front of their face. A lot of people will be like, oh, you got to put Christmas trees in your lake. That's the best thing to do. You got to put Christmas trees in. But that can be good, but like you have to take into account your goals. Like you have to look at the whole big picture. So we'll talk about crappies real quick. Crappies are going to be, like I said, an additional food source to your population. In this lake, they're spawning, like I've said. The bass are controlling their offspring to where they're not getting too abundant. There's a lot of different size classes represented. So I mean, right there, just right there, you've got a couple size classes of crappie, which tells me that their spawning is good, it's happening. That crappie is 8 1/4. We're gonna tag like a couple crappies here. 0.32. Yep, 120. So with crappie, again, there's gonna be different strategies for different goals. If your goal is to grow trophy crappie, it's very similar to your bluegill. You wanna limit the recruitment, you wanna limit their spawning, and you wanna reduce the intermediate sizes. So this would be your upper end of your crappies. This would be the intermediate size. You would try to reduce this, so you'd have Bill come and you'd have him catch a bunch of these 8 or 9 inchers, take them out, and you'd leave those 11 to 12 inchers in here, let them keep growing, okay? If all you wanna do is grow big bass, let the crappies do their thing. Just let them spawn, let them go. Don't take any. I mean, you can always harvest some crappie. Like you can take out, 20 of them, 30 of them if you wanna have a fish fry. You're not gonna stop it. You're not gonna stop their spawning. You're not gonna completely eradicate them by doing that. But there's no need to do that unless they're stacking up at a certain size class, which a lot of times they naturally will do. But if you've got, a good heavy bass population, they can stay in check. It's a 9-inch crappie. 0.40. These are all very healthy fish. These are all very healthy crappies.
Like that.
Yeah, these are beautiful.
Kind of 4 or 5 year old fish too?
12 inches. I would say it's 5 years old. It's right under a pound, 0.98. Yeah, that'd make for a killer fish fry right there. That's beautiful fish. Overall, this is killer.
Yeah.
It's killer. Like, I don't care. I mean, even if you like fishing for big bass, you can't tell me that you would come here and fish and not have fun.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You mean to tell me you'd come and catch this fish and you wouldn't have fun? Get out of here. That's a 13-inch crappie. It's gonna be over a pound. Another couple things to say about this lake would be just kind of to key in on the water quality. At this point, you really don't want to come in and reduce all the nutrients out of the water because the nutrients are feeding phytoplankton blooms. And so it is helping you. It's not like you want to just get rid of all the nutrients. You want to leave it pretty fertile. But in terms of just continuing to maintain it, there's a couple different things you can do depending on your goal. You can use aeration is one thing that you can use in some cases. I don't necessarily see a reason that you would need it in this lake. But as lakes age and they begin to build up organic matter, aeration systems can really help to breathe new life into a lake and kind of turn back the clock a little bit on them and gain them back some more years and start maintaining the level of nutrients versus letting it just continue to get worse and worse and worse. A lot of times the hardest thing is just having power at the lake. So you've got power 75 feet from the lake.
And aeration will also help with, it also changes the amount of pounds of fish.
It allows you to carry a lot more poundage through the summertime and through the wintertime. So it's something that I totally recommend to, the right people, but it's not the right answer for every situation. It's very specific.
This pond's not dying for it right now.
It's not dying for it. Would it benefit from an aeration system? Totally would benefit. It would help just to, allow you to carry more fish. It's an insurance policy for if, wintertime you get a lot of ice, which you probably don't get a lot of ice down this far south, but where we are up in Peoria and further north and northern Iowa, like that kind of stuff, you get a lot of ice. And so if you get a thick ice coat and then you get about a foot of snow, there's gonna be no sunlight coming into that lake. And so you can't have issues with fish kills at that time. So if you do have an aeration system, when you get that ice and you get that snow, flip that sucker on for a day, open up the lake, and you're good. You can let it freeze over clear again, sunlight's getting down, your fish don't die.
You hear that milfoil's great, and you hear, certain things are good. What do you got to say about what vegetation should be promoted?
There's benefit to a diverse vegetation culture. So having a lot of native rooted plants is always gonna be the best. Some filamentous algae is not bad. Like the stuff that we're seeing floating here, that's filamentous algae. It's not bad. Most people don't like looking at it on their ponds, but it's not bad. Rooted plants, like this is a rooted plant. This is milfoil actually. Milfoil is not necessarily a good native plant. It's an invasive. So there are native plants like One very good native aquatic plant that I really like is called American pondweed. It's got good cover, but it's not very dense coming up the stem, so it leaves a lot of open area underneath there, provides shade. So that's a really good plant that I like. Plants are vital to the environment. They produce oxygen for the water. If there's no plants, there's no photosynthesis, there's no oxygen. If you don't have that oxygen in the water, you're not gonna have fish, they're gonna die. So, does that make sense too? A lot of people just wanna kill everything in their pond, and they don't realize what that stuff is actually doing. If the person who buys this property wants to look into cleaning it up and maybe, focusing more on using it as a recreational lake, like not just fishing, you can do things to help clear the water column. You can do things to help reduce vegetation in certain areas so that you're not just killing everything in the whole lake. But if you're wanting to come in here and make this just a killer fishing lake, you're gonna let it grow stuff. You're gonna let it bloom with the plankton. You're gonna let it, be abundant in nutrients to where it's gonna help grow more fish. This pond could sustain populations of bass, bluegill, crappie, tiger muskie, northern pike. You could put a population of yellow perch in here. It's deep enough for that. You could stock some walleye in here. Like, you could have just a diverse fish population. Would be a lot of fun. So it's possible. Keep going. There's an app called Smartfish. It was created by Wade Bales from down in the Carolinas. He's a fish management professional. He understands the importance of harvesting fish, and he created this app to where you can input your data, automatically calculates your relative weight of that fish, and you can decide, do I need to harvest this fish or do I need to throw this fish back? And it tracks all of your information that you put into the app, saves it online to where you can differentiate from, put it into this app's file, or this lake's file, and you can continue to track it throughout the year. And then, into the next year, you can see, okay, last year, this is what, my average relative weights were. This is what my sizes of fish were. Now, 2021, here's what my averages are. Here's what my relative weights are. And then you can see it. I mean, you just see it right there, plain as day. And you can say, okay, obviously, my fish that are 14 inches are not very healthy. We got to pull them out.
That helps you do your job for landowners.
And what's even cooler is you can share that information with me. So, you can have constant communication.
We just got done shocking this pond, and I'll let him talk about what he saw, but it was for anybody that's got a pond, I mean, you owe it to yourself to do that. At least once. I mean,
totally.
That was wild.
We went in and we did a survey on this lake, and what I saw before I even started shocking the lake was I saw that this lake just had incredible structure. It had incredible bones, and with that, I mean, that's a very key aspect to growing a healthy fish population. And after shocking the lake and after seeing all the fish, I'm impressed. We shocked up tons of bluegill. Absolutely beautiful bluegill, half-pound bluegill and bigger. Just some absolute beautiful crappie. Some crappie that were like 13 inches. All different sizes of crappie. We shocked up bass. We shocked up really healthy bass. Not just a bunch of small ones, but there were, representative all size classes were there. We shocked a really nice 4-pounder. Yep. Right now the lake's naturally producing, very, very healthy panfish population. Can easily be transitioned into a trophy bass fishery if that is the goal. And all that stuff can be discussed, in the report and any other time you're looking for recommendations.
So in other words, if a guy comes and buys this place, you've already got a tremendous foundation. All
Absolutely.
They need to do is figure out how they want to fine tune it to whatever their specific needs is.
Absolutely. This lake it's got the depth. It's over 23 feet deep. That's awesome depth. It's got the size. It's a very fertile body of water, so it's naturally going to produce a lot of fish, which you really need in a trophy bass lake or in a trophy panfish lake. Either way, having the ability to produce heavy biomass of fish helps so much.
This lake was kind of the wild card when we pulled in here. You know, we knew that this was going to be a trophy deer farm. We knew it had great bones, like he said the lake does. You know, great bones as far as the property goes and the potential the property had, but like, we haven't done much of this before, so just this is like the icing on the cake. I mean, there's nothing that this property doesn't have at this point.
Yeah, and just having the pond, I mean, even if it was, if today was atrocious, you know, just having the pond and that cabin site and this, I mean, but this was the icing on the cake. A lot of fun and a lot of info, so thank you.
Yeah, it was my pleasure.